So we gathered now on the occasion of the publication of the 61st issue of the Journal on Puppetry, Arts and Theatre of Animated Forms, Lutka. So welcome again. A roundtable with a meaningful title, Puppetry on the Edge. Before we start our debate, our discussion, I would like to say that the journal was published as part of the project EU Contemporary Puppetry Critical Platform, supported by Creative Europe. Also, as you can see right here in front of us, there is a printed version of the journal, which is published in Slovenian and English. But of course, there are also Croatian and Lithuanian versions, which are going to be shortly published digitally. In addition to Lutkovno gledališče Ljubljana, there are also partners from Croatia, the Academy of Art and Culture from Osijek, Lithuania, Theatre Lele, I hope I did pronounce it right, and Scotland, Puppet Animation Scotland, who are also involved in the publication, promotion, and of course distribution of the journal. I hope we will all impress you by the topics we're going to talk about, but of course, if you want to purchase the last issue, it is going to be possible in the bookstore of the Puppet Theatre of Ljubljana, right there. Yes. First, of course, I would like to present the participants of this roundtable. Right next to me is Tjaša Bertoncelj, dramaturg, critic, curator, and editor-in-chief of the journal Lutka. Next to her is Maša Radi, critic, theatrologist, and cultural sociologist, working in Slovenia and abroad, also co-editor of the web portal Kritika. And next to Maša, Igor Tretinjak, Doctor of Science, theater critic, theatrologist, lecturer at the Academy of Arts and Culture in Osijek, editor-in-chief of the portal kritikas.com, editor of the regional platform Od malih nogu, coordinator of the Croatian section of the Creative Europe Project Contemporary Puppetry Critical Platform, and I'm pretty sure much more. But I will stop right here. And last but not least, Leino, artistic director, manager, actor, for the International Visual Theatre Festival Tallinn Tref, and also Baltic Visual Theatre Showcase. So also I welcome you again. And right now I'm going to make a little introduction. We're not going to start to talk about the 61st edition of Lutka right yet, because I think there is a red thread which is relatively long, like 10 years, because if we can see the publications of all the journals Lutka, we can see that the issue of 2013 was asking the questions about tradition, about the present, so how tradition intervenes in the present. And if we go on, in 2016, we were asking questions: what is animated form? What could be called animated form, and by meaning that puppet form, and what justifies the term animated? And in 2019, we were asking ourselves, what about new technologies? Okay, we found the terms what could be, what should be animated, but what does it happen when new technologies come into the field of puppetry art? Do they fear us? Do they scare us? Or on the other hand, do they fascinate us? And this is how we come to this issue of Lutka in 2022. We already defined tradition, we defined contemporary, we defined animated, we defined new technologies in the fields of puppetry. But nowadays, we have a certain desire to find new definitions, to redefine the fields of puppetry. And my first question goes to Tjaša. So, what was your strategy, your method to search the topics, to search the new definitions of puppetry nowadays? How did you plan the publications?
First of all, welcome. I would like to firstly say thank you to all the participants of this magazine. It was wonderful collaboration, and to all the writers, co-editors, proofreaders, photographers, producers, and big thanks also to Ida Schmidt, the designer of the magazine, that she really knows how to put the potential, the visual potential of puppetry to the journal. We were starting with the magazine in searching for what is now the contemporary praxis. What are we thinking about when we are speaking about puppetry? What can we point out that are new forms? And like you were saying, if I can answer the question about, I would really like to point out that it's really important and necessary to speak about puppetry and that it has some kind of professional treatment. What is puppetry, which is kind of starving in these times. So Lutka is therefore one of the few, or maybe one publication in Slovenia that offers this space for contemporary theoretical reflection in the field of puppetry. And this kind of discussion actually strengthens the theatrical power of the puppetry art, and it showed as the result as a really interesting subject of attention. So the puppetry has a lot of potential in theory, in sociology, in philosophy, in theatrology. So this year, journal, it covers the edge points at the level of praxis, theory, and politics, and many interesting articles were on this topic. Yes, we were dividing them based on. So the theoretical part I will speak later about. And then we have politics, how the puppet through all the history showed how it's always leaning on the society, speaking about it, commenting it, so to be some kind of critical partner of the society that is always aware what is going on. And then of course praxis that Leino maybe will talk about more.
Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, the theoretical part, in the last issue of Lutka tries to broaden up or widen the definitions, which are still in some way sometimes almost diametrically opposed terms, such as animate, inanimate, puppet, puppeteer, material or substance versus story, individual versus collective. And of course, we have to talk about of each of these terms, but is there any difference if we look the last 10 years how these terms are changing, and also is our reflection different?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was actually really interesting that in all the contributions in the theoretical parts, a lot of authors are sitting here, and I think behind also. They shown the contemporary guidelines a tendency to define a new approach that questions traditional pairs and concepts. So we have binary binary constructs. So like you said, animate, inanimate, puppet, puppeteer. And through the history, it served as the basic theatrological treatment of puppetry, because puppetry actually needed to strengthen itself with the theory. So it needed these concepts that it became a serious art form. And nowadays, I think that the theory is thinking beyond and one step back. So we are not longer talking about what falls under individual concept or what but we are thinking what this concept even means. How can we rethink it? Is it possible to place it in different relationship with other concept? And what Maša, Radi will probably say something about it. Can we put it in different position of power? So this kind of binarism is actually in contemporary world and theory of puppetry is demolished into the possibility of more fluid and horizontal and different approach. We can call it postmodernistic or some kind of undefinable approach to puppetry art. And when we are not longer tied to these traditional definitions and determinations of puppetry, we can actually broaden the idea what puppetry is. And I have an article inside the magazine that is actually, I was interested in the concept of inanimate and animate, which are actually the important part of the classical definition of puppetry. So something that is inanimate, with animation, it becomes a live being. So I was actually interested in this equation and the individual terms that are in it. And if we take a step back and see the sorry for my English, and see the contemporary praxis, we can see that these kind of elements can be re-examined. So the basic of the puppetry, for example, of being something inanimate, is no longer necessary. So it's actually much more complex, and it shows that the modes of inanimate and animate becomes in the modern world really much more complex. And the same thing we can speak about animation, that is not anymore in this kind of traditional way perceptive, that is something that is directly moving the puppet, and this is the base of what puppetry is. But we can see that animation has a broader term of perceiving. So it can be animation of perception of the public. It can be the technological, like it was in the previous Lutka magazine, or maybe sound animation. So these are not new things that the puppeteers are collecting, because that the puppet is broader is actually old news, but how we destruct this kind of concept. Because in my perspective, if we define one concept, we simultaneously mold the object of this concept. And in the case of puppetry, what it's shown in this journal, in this issue, that the puppetry is actually constantly pushing the boundaries and the theoretical limits. And I think this is the contemporary definition of puppetry, so that it's always on the edge, that it's thinking about itself and it's pushing the limits and going to the transcending forms. And I think this is the difference between before and then.
Thank you. And straight forward, I would like to continue with you, Maša, because as Tjaša already mentioned, the binary structure, and also nowadays desire, or maybe just a trend to go beyond this binary structure. From what point of view did you analyze this binary structure, and from what point of view did you present another conception, like maybe less narrow?
Yes, I looked at a binary structure from the perception of gender, and in relation to what a gender of a puppet is, and how a puppet or a construction of a puppet could either perpetuate the binary of the gender, so female and male, or how could it transcend it. And I did that through a short discussion of how a neutral puppet doesn't actually exist. How a puppet, because it was usually, or at the beginning, very much a male-dominated form, which was highly appreciated in the art world, but was not meant to be made by women or made for women as well. How the puppet is always, in a sense, we always see it if you see a neutral puppet with a neutral body. So, for example, if there is a puppet that has like a square body and like arms, if it's flat, you would perceive it mostly as male, unless it has some additions on that would make it female. And I do that as a parallel to Barbie dolls, for example, which if a Barbie doll has to be female, it has to have either long hair, or if it has short hair, it usually has the breast. So there is like a process of signifying how a female puppet is and what a male puppet is in like this. But when I'm speaking about this female and male puppets, I'm mostly talking about puppets and not animated objects. So puppets which are animating either humans, so in the human world where we mostly still define gender by the binaries, and we mostly still define gender based on visual representation or biological representation of gender, or either in terms when we're talking about puppets of animals, when we anthropomorphize them, because we always also have the tendency to at least have a sort of signification, even if we don't want it. There's usually like, if there is a rabbit and if it doesn't have like something pink on it, many people will read it as male, even if maybe the intention of the maker of the puppet or the like director wasn't such. Like, it's such a process of communication between the stage and the audience, and not necessarily only defined by intentions of someone putting it on stage. So I was kind of wondering in my article took like an arc from this discussion of where the binary is shown and how is it also possibly shown in animated objects. If we try to animate objects in a way that they represent humans, like the person animating it already also a bit signifies the gender of the object, even if it doesn't, the animated object actually doesn't have a gender. Like, you will still make connections in your head. I can see it also in myself, for example, and as someone who's very aware of this gender presentation and gender in general, but there's still like this connection in your brain that maybe tends to see like a glass animated by a woman, and like if speaking with a like specifically maybe lighter voice, you will maybe read some sort of gender into it, maybe not the same gender as in humans, but there is some tendency. And then I was wondering what the potential of the puppetry as the form that actually can exist without a human body on stage is, because in comparison to dramatic theater, where there's always actors on stage and they're made of this biological mess of molecules and cells, puppet actually exists as a field of possibilities. So before someone constructs a puppet, there can actually exist no idea of what a puppet can be and how it can look. So a puppet can be literally anything in comparison to a human actor who is always already limited by their own body. Like even if it exists outside of the visual gender binary, like there's still a body that we will read as a binary, or we'll try to read as a binary, or we will try to not read it. But there is this basis that cannot really be erased on the stage unless it's really masked by some sort of a complicated, I don't know, mask or costume or something like that. And I was wondering which puppetry or animated forms or even maybe objects without animated could make a space for a puppet that is moving beyond the binary. And I went quite onto I sort of dove into more speculative phase, where I found that maybe perhaps it is in forms that are not animated by a puppeteer, so are not also moved by someone, which is already a certain relationship of animation, of a control, and which are so not recognized as anything anthropomorphic that maybe we don't even perceive them usually as something that could come alive. but then can come alive through specific processes. And I give an example of a show that we actually saw last year in Ljubljana, which was an animation of like stage lights, because it's so far from anything anthropomorphic or humanoid that like actually you cannot see anything, even in moves in their bodies, because there's no body, it's just a light. You cannot see anything of the gender binary, so you cannot read the body as anything but a light, for example. And because it is animated, or it is like programmed through like a set of what's it called, like technical instructions, there's also not someone physically moving it, so they move on themselves, so they are completely independent live or alive objects, however you see them, that actually like exist beyond that. So that was kind of my like the arc of my my discussion, which was kind of trying to be more speculative than saying, oh, these are all the answers, but more of how to think and how to present puppets, animated objects, inanimated objects that come alive before us, without anyhow putting them into any sort of gender binary. And I think yeah.
And exactly, that was also my impression of reading your article, because what the journal also talks about is the increasingly presentation of material, substance in nowadays puppet plays or animated or theater of animated forms. Could we say that there are really like productions who are using material but which is not profiled, which is not like let's say signed with those kind of stereotypes or maybe concepts? And what is your observation on it? Does the choice of material also leads us to future productions where we could maybe feel maybe more free or without like these stereotypes, if you understand what I mean?
Yes, I think yes, especially material that's not maybe as solid as like a puppet or a body or something is, because if you have, for example, sand maybe or water, like yes, especially sand, if you keep it dry, there's absolutely like no resemblance. And also maybe another interesting thing is that material also, in the sense that we can, there's new practices of connection making between us and material, which is kind of something that's also quite present in many post-humanist theories and on how to relate to objects or materials or like things that we usually don't perceive as something that we can connect to, or mostly people in the world with outside these bubbles of ecology or philosophy don't perceive as alive. And I think maybe animation of materials, various materials, is a really good way to practice both of these things. So this ecological perspective, as well as this perspective of connecting to something that exists just beyond it, but this now suddenly we see it as alive, and maybe we have some sort of like either empathy or connection with it. So it also quite nicely opens up another perspective of thinking about how to relate to things that are not humans or animals or flowers, which is a very necessary question to have in terms like now in the times of ecological crisis.
Yeah, and maybe just like a thought, but it is a central trend or one of the tendencies nowadays to go maybe like to deconstruct the anthropomorphic system. I think the new term used is Anthropocene. That means that the term or a new concept or a new maybe way of thinking where the human being is not in the central position. So maybe this combines, like you said, like other philosophies, ecology, and one of the topics also mentioned in the journal, politics, how politics, even though practiced and by a human, but maybe without this central position. Maybe after with the questions of the audience, we will say something more about this. But maybe now, like, let's try to find a new definition, talking about tradition, because even though, like Maša was just telling us about future production or productions or future views of puppet theater, but still we cannot deny tradition. We shouldn't deny tradition. So how to think today tradition
Maybe
of
we
puppetry?
can't deny it. After Maša is young and she is looking into the future. I'm going back deep into the history and prehistory of puppetry. In my text, I didn't know what to write, and then I decided I will try to connect Croatian puppetry and contemporary puppetry. And that was first problem, because Croatian puppetry is in big percentage traditional puppetry with puppet in focus. And then I decided to leave puppet in focus in center of my text, but to find some contemporary twist. And I found it in very recent play from 1988, Where We in Vietnam Mini from Zagreb Puppet Theater, in which they had a very interesting that twist. In first part of play, they had tabletop puppets which were very mobile, animated, and ruled by their animators. And then after the main scene, that puppets were changed by soft, large, and very heavy puppets, which are immobile, and they became burden to their puppeteers, their actors, animators, and also they, with that a lot of burden, they become some kind of rulers of their own puppeteers. And in traditional puppetry, this passivization of puppet and immobile puppet on the scene is dead puppet on the scene. But in this context, this puppet with its passivization became ruler, and this was for me very interesting. And I decided, okay, now I will go much earlier in prehistory of puppetry, and then I found in prehistory of puppetry that immobile phase, if we believe Charles Magnin, that first puppets were passive and immobile idols and icons who were some kind of hands of they were in hands of God. They were some kind of representation of gods, so people worship them. So this is one null for puppets, although they're immobile. So they were some kind of rulers of people. And then became a history of puppetry in which puppets changed their ruler, gods had some other business, and people took them in their hands, and immobility was changed with mobility, but the puppets were just puppets in the hands of people. Now we have this contemporary idea, so now I'm going near Maša and Maša's ideas and time. In these contemporary ideas, puppets, and I think puppets are some kind of they have some power to decide something. So they decided to get back to prehistory. So they put their own mobility and dependence on people aside, and they became immobile, and but also independent of people, but also of God. So they are now in my idea and in place that I was looking and analyzing. They are becoming independent, but also in some of the place they became even the rulers of their own yesterday's rulers, animators of their own yesterday's animators. For me, that was very interesting, like playing with puppetry, and I like to play in theory with that stuff. But also, we are in the same partners are finishing now the book about contemporary puppetry, and for that book, I had to think of some definition of contemporary puppetry. And this text, so thanks Tjaša to let me to write, to give me the chance to write the text. In this, my definition of contemporary puppetry is change of focus from firstly text, then a puppet, then some other elements, to relationship between different elements. And in all this place, which you will see when you get your Lutka. In all this place, a relationship was this change of relationship was driving force for puppets and for plays. So this text helped me to test my definition of puppetry, and I think we made it.
Maybe any comments on?
No comment.
Of course, you are invited to do that. And still, I think there will be some space for questions. And again, you are invited to intervene in the end. But one of the questions when we were preparing the topics for this event was also the practice. We, of course, we need to leave the space for theory. We need to create and nourish the space for theory. But what is the actuality? What is the presence of the practice nowadays? And maybe later also participants of the festival from other countries can share their ideas. But I will ask Leino to talk about practice in Baltic countries, because if I can make a really quick resume of what we were talking about, like finding new definitions, talking about how to involve other fields, disciplines of human, let's say, just actions in the world, how to think, rethink, reinvent tradition, but where are the places where we do this? Are there schools? Are there academies? Are there maybe school programs? Are we going to talk about the new generations who are going to take all this investment and action in the future years? So what is the situation in Baltic countries?
Thank you. Yes, sorry. Maybe I'm going to a bit far from you, but I'm just trying to give you some kind of short overview about the situation in Baltic and Nordic countries and the situation of contemporary puppetry education in Baltic and Nordic countries, and also talk about the future perspectives. In my opinion, it seems somehow that we are in a new beginning again. I mean, we need to ask the same questions we have already asked decades ago, but we need to do it again. So a few years ago, I suddenly realized that puppetry was no longer taught at the university level, neither in the Nordic nor the Baltic countries. In most of these countries, schools specializing in the discipline had once operated, and some were still operating not that long ago. University level puppetry education has generally been quite eclectic in the Baltic and Nordic countries, and the overall educational background of puppeteers and directors is a mixture of special education, conventional drama training, studio training, short-term courses, and skills acquired on the job. In recent years, all curricula offering special puppetry education have ceased to exist. It is important to note that the schools themselves have not closed, but puppet theatre studies have been integrated with other disciplines. They are being combined with multimedia training, drama or physical theatre training, as well as puppetry training. In other words, puppet theatre education has become a part of contemporary performing artist training. So the question for us was, can puppet theatre be sustainable as an independent discipline if the rising generation lacks formal puppetry training? Should we be worried about the situation, or is it just an organic process, something temporary? And after a short visual theatre period, the puppetry will be in focus again. But at the same time, the fact is that requirements for a modern puppet show have changed. The next important question was, what should a modern puppeteer be like? Thus, he have to have universal skills, a mixture of a good drama actor and a puppet actor, whose toolbox also includes material theatre, digital and multimedia theatre, mask theatre, physical theatre, etc. So, university-level puppetry education seems to be at a crossroads. Is it starting to train performers with universal skills, or would it be wiser to offer a specific basic field in addition to which different techniques of theatre types can be built? And this raised other questions. Where, how often, and how many contemporary puppeteers do we need in our region? The training of puppeteer is expensive, and at the same time it is difficult to keep it going. We don't need 20 specialized puppeteers in every country every 2 years. But should the course be taken every 5 years, the school would have to rebuild itself every time, review the curriculum, modernize, find teachers, and so on. The demand for new puppet theatres varies from country to country, but it is certain that no country currently can find a use for an entire graduating class of puppeteers every 2 years. Then we had some meetings with our Baltic colleagues, and we realized that establishing a joint puppetry academy in one of the countries under consideration as an international curriculum that would supply all visual and puppet theatres in our partner countries with puppeteers, directors, artists, and puppet masters, it is too ambitious, and we don't have time and money to deal with it. So we decided to keep it simple and integrate the contemporary puppetry studies into the drama actors curriculum. We started negotiation in Lithuanian, Latvian, and Estonian drama academies, and our goal is to give to students the basics of puppetry and also organize with those students international visual theatre workshops where to study different types of contemporary puppet theatre. At the moment we are at the beginning of a very long trip, but at the same time we already have some good experience for some good examples. The artistic director of our theatre, Estonian Theatre for Young Audiences, Mirko Rajas, taught some years ago puppetry to drama students during their first year, and in their fourth year he made a puppet performance with them, and the results were really good. As Mirko said later, 6 or 7 from 13 students could also become good contemporary puppeteers, and actually 2 of them started from this fall in our theatre as actors. Estonian Drama and Music Academy has been open to our ideas, and after 2 years we plan to start with a master degree program for visual theatre directors. We don't know at the moment can we really do it, but we hope to do it. For a conclusion, from our point of view, we just like to inform you about the situation in our region in hope to build up a network and find some good masters who could teach our students as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Leino. Maybe Igor, as a lecturer, what is your point? So we can start networking straight away. So what is your point? Is the situation in Croatia, and I'm pretty sure in the audience...
If we have just a study of puppetry, nobody would...
apply.
Yes, but we have puppetry and acting together first 3 years at BA. So after 3 years we have, I don't know, 10 puppeteers and actors with diplomas or some, I don't know what they have after 3 years. So always on every class we have, I don't know, 3-4 students who fall in love in puppet and puppeteering, and then they go to MA, and then we have all Croatian theaters are full of our students. So until all 100% of theaters will be full with students, they have somewhere to go. After that, I don't know what will they do, because we have 5 city theaters, puppet theaters, but then I hope they will make their independence theater, little independent theaters, and this is future of contemporary puppetry, I think, in Croatia. It will be about money. It will be very hard, and but who is going to survive? We will talk about him next time.
Maybe you gave an idea for the next issue of
Survivors.
Survivors after the edge. The universe is calling. So maybe straight away, after all these different topics, there are some questions from the audience. Were you triggered by some topics, or would you want to know something more?
I would just add something to the latest development. I think that the concept of high degree or academy education that Leino is explaining is not quite the same in the range of knowledge being given in their perspective and what the traditional academy in our parts of the world is giving. So probably the networking level on the European size would make something also to this, what I'm saying about this, on the level of concept, what is being taught for the profiles that would become contemporary puppeteers. And contemporary, also creative artists in the field of puppetry. So not only actors, not only animators. I think that the most needed thing here would be collaboration between masters on the European level, for sure.
Our idea is that first 3 years BA would be traditional, and then MA would be more contemporary. So we will see you at MA together.
And if I try to just combine what was already said, I agree with you by this really widening up, because, like, as we said, contemporary puppet artist, or let's say artist of animated forms, should be a good actor, a good animator, also with a good knowledge of tradition. But if I go back to the theory, also a good thinker, a good observer of the society, because there is one point of deciding which material we will use, but what story are we going to tell with the material? So maybe like the biggest challenge in the few years or maybe decades is going to be like really the redefinition of an artist, and I think that puppet artist is going to become like everything in one person. But I would like to go back to the political, like if we can imagine this contemporary puppet artist, who can act, who can react, who can redefine and also reflect the society. Is maybe Tjaša, for you, and from what is also presented in the political part of the issue, can puppetry become politically engaged, or on what levels puppets can move the society? Or
so I think that this is a must. And it's in the traditional puppetry, it was, like I said in the start, it was this kind of important part. It was important part of puppetry, because it was always in the edge. It was being marginalized, and so it had a bigger voice in society, because I don't know, the kings and the leaders didn't thought that puppetry has such kind of power. And now it's institutionalized, and we have a question of can it be politically engaged puppet theater in the institutions that have some kind of rules that are connected with the ministries, and can be puppet plays in the institutions really an act of pure political comment. But we have a problem in Slovenia that, well, probably also in Europe, that the independent companies don't have problems with the finance. So the institution became a basic part of the experiment and of commenting and politically engaged theater. So to answer your question, if I did, absolutely puppetry has to be always watching out the society, what is going on, and be aware, because I think from my perspective, if we lose the reflection, we lose some kind of point of theater and art, and I think with puppetry as being this kind of broad form, it means that it can be broad also in the discussion about political and society part. So it would go in. It would be another level of puppetry if suddenly it would become apolitical, if it's possible to be apolitical. Yeah, I think.
I like political activity that Tim Grabner does, and also you and with him. This is like ecological activity very often, and this is, I think, puppetry, contemporary puppetry has a lot of potential in this part.
Yeah. When you mentioned Tim Grabner, I presume you did mean Tihožitje?
And also that sky above us. Sky above us.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Also, if we're talking about the actors, also Matthias Olce involves a lot of political and especially interactive, or puts warnings to the audience how to be more engaged. And now I would really and kindly invite you that you also present us your ideas.
I'm really interested in the idea of puppet as an independent form, because I think we start now in a contemporary theory of puppetry. We talk a lot about puppet becoming independent, becoming of her own, and also what you mentioned, like the breaking of anthropocentric thinking. I think the most anthropocentric thing we as a society did was decide to not be anthropocentric, and in a way it's always interesting. There is always a human being behind art, in the making of it as well as in perception. A puppet does not exist without the perception of a human being, because puppet is a form of art, and art is inscribed only into our abstract thinking. I think to me it's always important to note that a puppet can be static, a puppet can be disjointed from an animator, even to such extremes that it's robotics moving on their own, but there's always a human being behind it, and that's where it can get political, where it can get radical, where it can get to the edge, I believe, because a puppet on its own is not strong enough. It doesn't have a human being next to it, which doesn't mean that we are in any kind of way more important than an object in a world where everything should be equal and perceived as equal. But I think it's the change of perspective that happened is a bit of a perverse way of thinking, actually, because we decided we're going to allow a puppet to become independent. We're taking even more control over the object as even more than we did with just animation. I think also what Maša was writing in her excellent article about breaking free from the stereotypes of binary thinking. I think this decision, you can now be independent, is again the same. We are in the same zone still. I think we still haven't break free from it, if it makes sense.
Yeah, maybe another question. So we shouldn't break it. We like, even if we decided, I really like what you said. It was our decision to become or to take the throne of anthropomorphic principles, but it was our decision to deny our centralization. But still, until there is art, there is going to be human. But maybe what made me thought was more like a conversion in direction of thinking. Like, it's not so hierarchical, but maybe it's more horizontal. So yeah, there's still we're still talking about puppetry. We stay in the field of human, but not like putting labels, but maybe letting the object, the material, the disciplines, the thoughts more, let's say, space to breathe or represent themselves. If
Absolutely, exactly that. Yeah.
May I add something? I think
course.
it is maybe a matter of modesty.
Mm-hmm.
So just like from the creators or artists' point of view, more this like wondering at the world, observing it.
Mm-hmm. And when you say modesty, maybe not demanded, but expected from the creators or also from the audience?
I guess from the creators.
Mm-hmm.
And if the audience is engaged enough to co-create the event, artistic event, while being present at it, there again won't be enough time or capacity to for these like judgments,
Mm-hmm.
but also for admiration and some sincere or whatever honest experience, I guess. And this is how the message can flow on this same level as you mentioned it. This is my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something like basic dilemmas that we face in nowadays society, and it resembles a little bit to the dilemma or binary concept of human against nature,
Mm-hmm.
which has to be rethinked, because when you take human out of nature, you made already the most crucial mistake. When you think that these are two entities, two different entities, so nothing will be changed actually at the end, but it must be rethought, and the position of subject and object has to be reshaped and remodeled. And like Leino said before, we are asking ourselves, probably we are somehow in the beginning putting out the same questions, and probably the answers won't be so different as they were in the past, but the process must be done for sure, of course, and the modality or the condition of the relations will change also, for sure.
Of course, because even though the questions and the answers might be similar, the conditions of being and living have changed. Did somebody had other thoughts also what we were talking about before?
Maybe I try to add something.
Yes,
I mean, I feel that contemporary puppetry theatre is an organic part of contemporary average drama theatre. I mean, average contemporary drama theatre uses more and more visual theatre types. They use visuality, they use puppets, they use masks, objects, multimedia theater, and I feel that drama theater approaches to the contemporary puppet theater with very long steps, and actually we can feel at the moment as a mainstream. I mean, it is our moment, and we don't need to think over about it. I mean, let's calm down and think about the content, what we need to express. I mean, this is a main point. Is it political or not political? For me, it is not a question at all. It depends on artists and what he or she wants to express. That's it.
I like what you said, because in the previous years, and I don't want to be judgmental, but like talking about puppetry was we had an impression that like puppets were always not on the edge but left behind. And I like what you're saying now, like puppetry and especially theater of animated forms has become like the something that other types of theater, other types of productions are coming to, yeah, maybe this is a new era of puppetry, or maybe it's just the society's reply to this fusion and the desire to be like, yeah, to make the artistic production, their artistic creations more fluid among themselves. Last call for questions. Otherwise, maybe just to keep it in mind, all the productions that are going to be presented at this year's festival. I think if you think about it, if you try to look for the new definitions, you are going to see that the topics about which we were talking today do reflect in the productions, talking about redefinition or transformation, talking about political, talking about materials and substances that make part of creative productions, talking about the use of stories or how do materials make stories. And I hope our discussion widened also your thoughts, even though you were relatively quiet. But I'm pretty sure the ideas will reflect inside of you. Of course, the festival is also an occasion to encounter new ideas, new people. So if you come up with a new idea that can also help the editors-in-chief in the future, maybe you're going to help also to create the new issue.
We can all meet here in Wednesday and talk about new definitions.
That is a nice suggestion.
But then you will talk and we will listen.
Yes. So I would like to thank all of you, especially and firstly Tjaša Bertoncelj, Maša Radi, Igor Tretinjak and Leino to participate in this discussion.
And
so
thank you,
Maša. Yeah, thank you.
It was my pleasure, and I hope our discussion together or separately about puppetry and theater of animated forms will continue in the years to come. Thank you again, and please do enjoy, because you will, the festival Lutka.